Hi, everyone. Welcome to an interview we're having with Phillip Moffat. Today, we're trying to explore what it means to be an entrepreneur in Europe and more specifically Germany. I'm going to let Phillip introduce himself now, and then we'll move on to some of the Q&As that we have prepared.
Hi, everyone. My name is Phillip. I was actually class of '86, long time ago. Grew up in Germany, born here in Hamburg, went to high school here, then came to Williams as a foreign student and did my 4 years at Williams and went into banking, working for a German bank in New York, moving back to Germany after that, and then quickly deciding to become an entrepreneur and starting in the leveraged buyout craze in the early 90s. Started my own company mid-90s, took it public when we had what's now called the new economy phase with internet companies growing and mushrooming. And since then, in the early 2000s, investing in renewable energy and big topic, solar, combined heat and power, wind power, big here in Europe and in particular in Germany, which was a pioneer country. And since then, investing as a venture capital investor in many startups and more mature businesses, and always the focus on taking them to the capital markets. So they all have to have a good equity story. And today, some of the areas I invest in are hydrogen, vertical farming, and of course, crypto. So that's where we are today.
That sounds great. It seems like you're really being kept busy by the new trends of the the times that we live in. My first question to you is: so you worked in New York for a German bank, and then you went back to Germany. And the first question is sort of what, beyond the trends that you saw happening with like you said, the new economy, and now with the environment, what were like the drivers that sparked your entrepreneurship, and what are those drivers that are still keeping you in entrepreneurship now?
Well, I think it's the environment. You grow up in the US is a different one than you grow up in Europe. In Europe, it's all more you get a job and you do the job all your life, and then you retire. In the US, I think it's different. And when at Williams, we had the great opportunity to have a lot of alumni and other people from Wall Street, from other areas of industry, come and as guest speakers and also as guest professors. And I think this is really something that inspired me, coming from Europe, from an area that was more where you got a regular job and you were not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship was really something very rare there. So this is something that I took along when I moved back to Europe, having been introduced to these really inspiring guys from Wall Street that held lectures at Williams. And this is something that I really cherish, that I only got at Williams, and that had I not gone to Williams and had I not experienced this atmosphere of entrepreneurship, I wouldn't have been able to do it in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. So it seems like a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit that you currently have and that you had when you moved back to Europe sort of came from the experiences you had at Williams. And I guess my next question is, were there any sort of key differences that you experienced with experiencing entrepreneurship in Germany versus what you thought it would be like in the US?
Well, the US, being 3 times the size of a country, for instance, like Germany, obviously has much larger industry. And the entrepreneurial spirit is also something that I consider more Anglo-Saxon than it is, to natural to other countries. So this is why entrepreneurship is really sponsored in the US by garage companies mushrooming, venture capital businesses taking these business to the next stage. In Europe, it historically, and in particular after returning from Williams, it was more like a bank industry. You had a company and it was financed by a bank. If you had an idea as an entrepreneur, it was extremely hard to get any sort of financing for that. So no garage stories like we had in the US. It was all bank financed. Venture capital was unheard of. All the other creative ways of financing do. And most importantly, the US has always stood for an intact and huge capital market. So as you see today with all the SPACs, for instance, great startup companies can go to the stock exchange through a SPAC. They can do an IPO themselves. In Europe, the IPO spirit is really not there. It's catching up and has caught up over the past years. But if you look at the volume of IPOs in Europe versus the US, I mean, it's like crazy, the gap that exists. So this, I think, is a mentality thing. And it's also like just the history of the capital markets, which is different in Europe.
So you alluded to the system changing, right? In Europe, the system allowing for more entrepreneurs to perhaps, gain some finances from other areas instead of just banks. By the way, this is not a question I'm going to ask here, so feel free to not answer it, but back to the interview. Yeah, so you said that the system in Europe is changing. So I guess what I'm wondering is, do you see, in the long term, maybe within the next sort of decade, we're going to get a lot more opportunity for entrepreneurs in Europe to succeed in the same ways that maybe the US system allows them to?
Yeah, absolutely. What has happened is over the past 20 years, I mean, the world has grown together. So you've had all the large US investment banks set up shop in Europe and around the world. You have global capital markets. So the gap that used to exist is no longer there. I mean, the world is now basically one large market with 3 trading zones. That's the US, Europe, and Asia. And so the difference that used to exist is no longer there. You have all the big Silicon Valley venture capital companies having their scouts in Europe, looking at startups. You have a lot of funding of German, French, Italian startups through Anglo-Saxon venture capital firms. So they now have the access to the global venture capital market. So today, for a German entrepreneur, it's really easy to get financing, as it didn't used to be 20 years ago, because they can just go to some of the scouts of the large VC companies. And there have been regional centers in Europe developing. I mean, London, where you're from, one of the big centers where I've done many investments, and I've also found many investors for my transaction. And then Berlin has become a big capital of startups with various successful companies emanating there. Many unicorns now coming from Germany, which never used to be the case. So this has changed, and I think it's now a global market, which is really good.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it means that, entrepreneurs like myself and the people who are watching right now are essentially entering a job market where globalization has allowed for us to benefit from systems all around the world. And so I guess my third, or you could say fourth question is, when you first started entrepreneurship in Europe, I understand that, the system then was a lot different, and you can say it was a little bit more formal and maybe bureaucratic. And one thing you alluded to is Europe kind of being more homogenous now in terms of entrepreneurship. Would you say that 20 years ago, when you started, or sorry, when you left New York to go to Germany, was Europe homogenous at that point in terms of entrepreneurship? Did we see certain disparities from maybe Western Europe to Eastern? And
yeah, it was completely different. I mean, now we have the EU. When I left New York to go back to Europe in the late 80s, early 90s, we had a bunch of European countries, different currencies, different languages. It was really like we had borders. You had to get a visa to go to another country. It was really crazy. So those were like micro markets. With the EU forming, this changed, and now we have one currency, which is great. We have 3 currency zones. We have the US, the euro, and we have of course the Chinese currency. So this has made Europe grow together, and so different from then. Today, as I said earlier, it's a global market. Then you had to basically live with the local circumstances and find your way around. And what I saw at the time was the slowly developing capital market, which I used and helped change this market and develop this market. And this was really something that helped my business a lot.
Right. Do you think there are any sort of drawbacks to this sort of globalization of entrepreneurship and the ability for entrepreneurs, all around the world to benefit from systems that, that they don't live in?
No, I think actually not. I think today is a huge benefit because right now, I mean, you can first of all, we have the internet today. We didn't have the internet then. So right now, I speak to Chinese guys. I speak to South African people. I speak to people in England, in the US, around the world. We have like programmers who sit in Sao Paulo. They sit in Kiev. They sit in Romania. They sit in Williamstown. It's so this is really only advantages. I don't see any disadvantages. The disadvantage is the only thing is when markets were closed, you were able to identify real deals. So today there's a huge transparency that you have venture capital companies, as I said earlier, from around the world looking at deals, and the market is extremely transparent. So in terms of finding a real deal, that's tricky today. On the other hand, you have a global market available for your products. You can take a company public in Asia, you can take it public in the US, you can take it public in Europe. So in terms of globalization, I only see huge advantages that have happened over the past 20 years.
And of course, the globalization we think is, we're projecting for it to grow even further. And so, entrepreneurs currently at Williams who are going to go into the real world will benefit even more, which is great.
Absolutely. And one example is I told you earlier, one of my very close business associates is a guy from a class way after me. He lives in Portland. His name is Josh. And we've done a number of deals together. We founded a company in San Diego, putting solar panels on educational institutions like University of San Diego and other places. We did IPOs in China. We did IPOs in Germany. And this was me living in Germany, him living formerly in La Jolla, and then later now in San Diego. So this really shows how we can globally interact with the Williams network. I only met Josh many years after I graduated. And so this, I think, is a good example. He identified, for instance, a company in Brooklyn that was a pioneer in tokenizing real estate. So we took the idea to Germany and said, look, guys, let's do this in Germany. So we JV'd with these guys. So this is globalization plus the Williams network. I think this really helped me.
Perfect. I mean, I guess that's what the network is there for, right? And that's why so many of us are able to benefit in our lives. So my next question is, so during your time at Williams, obviously every student has plans of what they intend to do after. My question is, from going back to your time just when you were about to graduate to now, what are like the key things that you learned during your career that you maybe didn't think you would learn, or that kind of surprised you during your time working, just so students get a grasp of, okay, what lessons can I expect to learn from going out into the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, what we always back then called the real world was, of course, the world outside of Williams. I mean, we had our wonderful little spot in the Berkshires, which was Williams, and then out there was the real world, right? So what are the lessons? First of all, I mean, you're equipped with probably one of the best educations that you can get today. So this was something, taking that into the world, I think, was something that I credit a lot for some of the success I've had in my life. I think one should be aware that one leaves Williams with just a really state-of-the-art education. Second thing is, the people I met while at Williams inspired me because they had, so many backgrounds and were from such different areas, different cultures. So I think this is something that took me out of my little cocoon, which I was coming from in Europe, where I just met Germans all my life. So coming to the US and then meeting all these fascinating people. So the mix of having this wonderful education with being exposed to all these ideas from my co-students, Plus, of course, what I really cherished was the dialogue with a few professors whom I really liked a lot, with whom I had, just a really good relationship. And having this outside of the classroom dialogue with really professors that stood out in their fields. I think these three elements helped me have like a great skill set to make it in outside of Williams. So then I went the hard way. I went to New York, which in those days, coming from Williams, going to New York, being out there alone, that also helped, of course. But not everyone will go to New York or wherever after Williams. But I would say these three elements really helped me sharpen my view of what I wanted to do. And so when I left Williams, I really had an extremely sharp picture of where I wanted to go. Whereas if you come from a European university, you're more like a generalist, and you trial and error. No trial and error after coming from Williams. Focused and stay with that focus.
Mm-hmm. Did you intend to move back to Germany after a few years in Wall Street?
Yes, this coincided with a geopolitical event, and that is after having been on Wall Street, I suddenly saw that the Iron Curtain in the late 80s, in 1989, fell. So I went back to Germany to really take some of the opportunities that came from like a whole world suddenly opening to the West. And this geopolitical event was quite interesting, and really said I need to go back and try to harvest some of the opportunities that came along. So I would say I have to credit this one geopolitical event for me coming back to Europe. Otherwise, I think I would have stayed in the US all my life, I guess.
Sounds good. What, in your opinion, is the sort of biggest challenge that like bidding entrepreneurs will face? Of course, none of us really ever know what's going to happen. Like you just said, geopolitical events can happen at any point, really. But just from what you've experienced, what do you think is like the big challenge that current entrepreneurs will face going into the real world?
It's something very simple, and I will not tell you that it's some sort of a rocket science. It's something very simple, and that is focus. What I said earlier, you need to be focused and you need to have a vision. And I think that's really important. And one thing that is very un-European but very American is to never give up. So I think I've had tons of challenges in my life. Facing like the verge of bankruptcy, facing whatever bankruptcy of a company. But you never have to give up. You always have to keep your vision, and I think that's extremely important. And the second thing is, today in our digital world, you have to start very, very early to build your network. I think the network that you personally have is really the value that you have. And I've seen like that over the past 20, 30 years that monetizing, sorry to say that, but my network, leveraging my network, that has really been something that is very important. So start right at Williams to build your network and your contacts, because they will be invaluable later in life. So to sum up, it's building your network of contacts in the areas that you're interested in, and to stay focused. That's so important, because there's so many sidetracks that you can, get onto. Your best friend is doing something that sounds really interesting and he's making a ton of money. Forget it. If you have your focus, stay with it. It'll be much more lucrative and interesting in the end once you've stayed focused.
So just to explore this idea of focus, do you think that, actually, let me backtrack. On this idea of focus, I know that, different entrepreneurs have different experiences. Certain, bidding entrepreneurs will perhaps need to focus on one idea and really hone in on that, whereas others will explore a variety. Do you think that bidding entrepreneurs should find one big idea that they're willing to spend a lot of time on, or do you think that they should actually explore other avenues like you've done in your career?
That's Honor, that's probably one of the most interesting questions you've asked, and that is something that has been with me all my life. I've met a ton of people who've been extremely focused, And I myself started off with the so-called portfolio theory, i.e., if you have 4 transactions going, one may go sour or 2, but 2 will survive. If I focus on one transaction, I'm stuck. If that goes sour, I have a problem. At the end of the day, I saw all those people who had the focus and who really focused on the thing they loved and they wanted to do were more successful in the end. So that's why I really recommend it to be for everyone to be really focused, because I've seen over the past 20, 30 years, the guys who've been focused and who were on their path and not distracted, those guys ended up more successful than the people who really had like many balls up in the air and tried the portfolio theory, as I call it.
Right. And what do you think is a good sign for a budding entrepreneur to maybe shift focus? Do you think there is ever a big sign for an entrepreneur to say, actually, maybe this idea is sort of starting to run dry and I should pursue something else?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is something which, somehow experience in life will tell you. Of course, at some point, if you've been focused, but things are not working out, you have to so-called cut your losses. That's true. I mean, but anyone, who is focused, who comes from Williams, who has the drive, will see that if something really is in a dead end road, he will just have to shift. But still, I think you need to be focused. But of course, but this is something, I can't give any advice, because this is something people have to experience themselves. If you realize you're in a dead end road, then of course, you have to change horses.
Okay. I do kind of have the last question here, and it's pretty open-ended. And I'll ask you now. So at the Entrepreneurship Summit this year, we are essentially pushing this idea of, what is your bumper sticker, right? Which is pretty open-ended. And I just kind of want to leave you to interpret that and then answer it as you wish. So yeah.
Well, I was expecting you would ask me this, and it's very simple. I think that the work-life balance is something that is very, very important, and this is something that everyone who starts off a career has to exactly look. Where is my work-life balance? What do I want to get? Do I want to get extremely successful and rich? Or do I want to be, hanging out on the beach all day long? So anywhere in between that, you have to, in a diagram, find your position. And I think the earlier you try to put that, little needle into exactly the graph, the area where you want to have your work-life balance, the better. Because I think this is something that people later, after like working for 20 years, found as an important decision. But I think today, what I see with a lot of guys right out of college, I have many young people like yourself working in my companies, and they are thinking very early on work-life balance, and I think that is the paramount question. And this is something what people should, even in college, think about, rather than like after 20 years say, oops, I worked so hard, where's all my free time? I haven't traveled the world, or other way around. Oh, I've not done really anything. I think I have to make some money now. So this is, the earlier you think about that, the better. And I think this is something where people can also get like a lot of advice from their peers, from their friends, parents, and so on. I think that's something that I thought about a lot during my life, and I wish I'd thought about it a little earlier.
So your bumper sticker is, think about work-life balance before you go out and work, pretty much.
Work-life balance is my bumper sticker on the left side, and on the right side it is live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. What does that mean to you?
Well, live long and prosper is from all-time favorite, of course, Spock, and that's just the fun bumper sticker.
Okay, so that's the one that you. Okay, I like that. This is actually the first time I'm getting left and right So I do.
Yeah, no, you need two bumper stickers on each side. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have the Williams one in the middle, like a Williams logo?
I used to have it. No, but it doesn't mean anything to people here in Europe. So and in the old days there used to be station wagons. Now on SUVs it's so far up, it's hard to see.
It's hard to see it. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Philip. I'm sure students will really appreciate your insight into, being an entrepreneur in Europe and the sort of globalization. And yeah, we really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Honor, for letting me share some of these insights after having also attended your wonderful institution many years ago.